Hey all, I'm Nate Moore, a member of the applications team. I'm here with our DTG expert, John LeDrew. He's going to be going through how to create test prints and make it easier for you to figure out what your print settings are going to be and make it much faster and a little more sure. So I'm going to let him take it away this morning, and I'm going to step behind the camera so we can make sure we know what's going on.
Thanks for the introduction, buddy. So my name's John. I'm the DTG, or digital imaging sort of expert here at Melco. I manage all of the digital equipment that we sell. We're moving beyond embroidery at Melco, as I'm sure you know by now. We're doing direct-to-garment printing with the Epson F2100, where we're using the Roland print cut line. So we're doing a print cut on vinyl, ton of different applications there from Roland. And we're really proud to announce that Epson just released, and we're now selling the new dye subline from Epson, the F6370. It's outstanding, and tune in the future because we're going to do a lot of fun stuff with that. It's really going to advance what you can do as a shop and really open up a lot of versatility and capabilities. With just a little bit of space and a few pieces of equipment, you're going to be able to start doing all sorts of fun things, and we're calling this the Melco Production Works. And there's a lot of fun things coming with that, so we're excited to show you all about that. But today, we're going to focus on direct-to-garment. This is the F2100 if you haven't seen it. It's an outstanding piece of equipment. It's extremely reliable. We're going to show you how to just basically run some test prints. And say, for example, you have a image from a customer that comes in. You're not really sure how it's going to look on a shirt. Maybe you're using a different kind of shirt. I want to teach you how to work with Garment Creator, work with the printer, and do sort of quadrant out prints with a couple different settings to see what's going to work best for your customer. And you might this will help you save a little bit of ink. It'll help you save some time. It'll help you save product. And it'll help you deliver the right application. So one thing we focus on a lot here is how to produce things efficiently, not a lot of expense, and be productive with your jobs. We want you to make money. That's the whole goal of what we're doing here, right, Nate?
Yeah, and one thing I just want to be really clear, we are looking at direct-to-garment, not dye sublimation this morning.
Correct.
But
dye sublimation's coming.
Yeah, pretty cool product.
Very cool product. So another note, this is my Facebook Live debut. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah, today's the first. So thank you all for tuning in, and let's get started here. So I'm just going to load a shirt like we normally would. We have a ton of videos, by the way, that I've created over the years. ProDTG.com is the place to go to see some of those. On also our Melco YouTube page, a ton of videos on the Epson direct-to-garment line. So I'm just going to load a shirt like I normally would. We're going to start with white. We're going to do a white version. We're going to do a black version. So we're going to use white ink, and we're going to use just color ink. I'm just going to load this shirt, make sure it's square and center. I actually have videos on how to do that, make sure things are square and center. But it's a pretty simple process. And switching over to my computer here, I will bring in some artwork. So typically artwork is done in some sort of graphic design software. We can use Corel, you can use Adobe. In this case, I'm an Adobe user. So let's just say, for example, a customer sent me this, and there's a lot of detail in here. And I want to make sure that, one, I'm preserving the detail, but I'm preserving the color. I'm kind of getting all the elements right. And when we take this into Garment Creator, there's a few different functions that we can mess with. But the first thing, and we'll go over that, but the first thing I want to do is make sure that my artwork is good for printing. So I'm going to open it in Photoshop. And the first thing I want to make sure is that there's a transparent background. And in this case, there is. If there was a black background or a white background or a blue background, we'd have to remove that before printing on a dark garment. On a white garment, we could have a white background, and that wouldn't be an issue. However, any of the white ink wouldn't show up. And in this case, there is some white ink in this design. But for simplicity purposes, we're just going to bypass that on this white sample. This is more designed for a black t-shirt, but not a big deal.
And so, for those of you new to Photoshop, the way he's telling that it is transparent is you see that little gray and white checkerboard in the background.
Right.
That's an indicator to us, the designers, that
Right.
that is transparent.
Yeah, that's called your alpha channel, your transparency. So I want to check and see what is the resolution, what is the size, what am I working with here? And as with all digital printers nowadays, they're all high resolution, large format, 1440 essentially by 720 or 1440 by 1440 high resolution printers. So we want to typically preserve our artwork resolution and use 300 dpi, no less than on average than 125 or 150. In this case, our design, this is an ideal setup here. It's approximately 2 size, so it's 11.81 wide, 15.5 tall, and it's 300 dpi. So that's ideally what we want. We want an artwork that is approximately the size we're going to print it with a high resolution. That'll preserve our resolution best possible and give us the best possible print. So I don't need Photoshop anymore. I know what I have. If I have to clean anything up, I can. But I know that we have some good artwork here, and when I print it, it's going to look good. So let's start sampling. I have my shirt on the platen the way I want it. I'm just dragging my artwork in. I can revise the size of this artwork, and basically the way we're going to do this is we're going to work within 4 different quadrants. We have the platen, we have the 14 by 16 platen set up on the printer. We can break that down into 4 different sections. So we're going to test one set of print settings here. We're going to test another set of print settings here, here, and here. And the way I like to do this essentially is just starting with the default setting. So in this case, we're printing on a light colored t-shirt. I'm just going to click light color t-shirt and then press print. And I want to show you the differences between some variations in different prints. So without further ado, let's just get started, start printing, and I can jibber jabber in the meantime. This artwork that we use in this case is coming from a company called Wildside. You can check out Wildside online. They have a ton of different stock graphics, a ton of different designs, all available for sale. I'd encourage you to go check them out. They have a lot of different resources. Just make sure my platen height is set correct. One of the things we always want to check. All right, and with that, we're going to move on to watching this thing print.
So a couple questions that have been asked.
Yes.
And I got to scroll back to find them, sorry. If they're completely new to DTG, can you
Yes.
just kind of give an overview of what it is?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question because we recognize that not all of you are direct-to-garment users yet. Many of you are probably embroidery machine users or maybe use some of our other equipment. Direct-to-garment is essentially, it's a large format printer that's printing water-based ink directly on a substrate. The value in that is you can do low volume, you can do one, you can do upwards of as many as you want. There's no limitations. Direct-to-garment and digital imaging has become extremely reliable. We can now group or pod together a number of different printers to really increase productivity. So you'll see a lot of people who are running F2100 direct-to-garment printers, not just one, but multiple prints at a time, multiple printers at a time. And again, we're just taking ink from the printer, printing it directly on the substrate. And in this case, we're printing on a white shirt. So here's our default setting, and here's our result. It's good, it's simple, it's there, right? I want to mention about printing on a white shirt that printing on a white shirt is similar to, say, printing on a piece of matte paper as opposed to a piece of gloss paper. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the dark colored shirt. But we're going to have a little bit of color loss. There's going to be a little bit of ink saturation into the garment. Printing on a white shirt, it's to be expected that you're going to see slightly less vibrancy than you would print on a dark shirt. But we're going to go through some techniques here to help increase your vibrancy. So I just moved quadrants. See, we had our design on this side. We're moving our design to the other. And without moving our shirt off the platen, essentially we just leave it where it is. We can move this design over and then try some new testing. So our default setting, nothing has changed. I'm going to just go into another setting and we're going to go let's go all the way to 4, high quality, and just try that. So we'll go from the default setting that was speed level 2, we'll go to speed level 4, which is quality. The slower it goes, the better the ink quality is typically, or the results. The faster it goes, you'll lose a little bit of vibrancy or color. So that's just going to take a quick second to spool, and it's going to print next to the other job. One thing you might notice on the machine, well, there's a little bit of a glare there, but it does say ink low, and I want to talk to you guys about a little bit about that while we're killing some time too. On the F2100, ink lasts a long, long time, especially color ink. Color ink will last many thousands of prints on average in the 600 milliliter cartridge range. So when you read ink low, that's more of an indicator that's saying, hey, we're running low on ink. If you don't have ink, you should order it. And that would be the same with any of your indicators on the F2100. There's a number of different indicators here that at one point it'll give you a warning. It's not something you need to change immediately. It's just saying, hey, if you don't have the supplies, order them. Do you have any more questions, Nate, while this is printing?
I have a question.
Lay it on me.
So when you're changing the speed levels, is that the number of passes? Is it the size of the pass, the size of the drops? What are you changing? Yeah,
it's the speed at which the printer it's the number of passes, frankly. So we're going to lay down more passes. The slower we go, how quick ink is discharged through the print head. I wish I knew more detail about that, but think of it as like a bidirectional as opposed to unidirectional print. In a lot of cases, a unidirectional print is going to give you higher results because you're laying down less ink in less time, as opposed to bidirectional where you're printing back and forth quicker. You're going to have a little bit, you sacrifice a little bit of a vibrancy or detail in that case. And that's frankly with any printer.
Well, bidirectional, you've got inertia working against you.
You have inertia working against you. Yeah, that's a good point. So why don't we look at this? It's a little bit hard to tell given our lighting, I think, in situation here. But our blacks are a little richer. Our reds are a little brighter. The orange and the blue is slightly better. But again, looking at this, it's almost hard to tell to the naked eye really how different it is. We certainly see a little bit more vibrancy and stuff in the level 4.
So I know that some of it's coming across on camera, but from across the room, you can definitely see a richness change.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's great. So, we'll talk a little bit about how to present this to your customer too, because we don't necessarily want to give them the best possible result right away and have them look at because we can typically work up to a result that the customer's happy with, right? So we'll start off in the mid-range typically on a result that we would show a customer for sampling or proofing, and then see if they like it. Maybe they don't want it that vibrant and bright and rich. Then you have room to go down. Maybe they do need it a little bit more precise or a little bit black's a little bit darker, for example, and then you could then come up in value too. So I like to give them a nice mid-range and let the customer decide what they want. One thing that we've always talked about at our print shop was assumptions lead to expenses. If you make decisions for what you think the customer might want, that could end up costing you in the end. Let's let the customer make the decision. So let's move this down to say level 3 and then get slightly more advanced here. Let's go to print option. Here we can double strike, so we're laying down a ton of ink. I like that feature, but I'm not necessarily a big fan of it. Let's talk about unidirectional or bidirectional. Again, unidirectional is going to give you a little bit better result. So why don't we do a normal print? Let's go back to level 4 and see if we see the difference between a unidirectional level 4 and a bidirectional level 4. The difference is going to be speed at which it prints. The printer prints, the F2100 prints really fast with white ink or with color ink on a white garment. So we might double our time to get a unidirectional print as opposed to a bidirectional print. However, we may get those results that the customer is really enthusiastic about. So printing on white, there are a number of different settings that are worth experimenting with in Garment Creator. You'll see printing on black, it's pretty straightforward. We want to lay down a pretty decent underbase and some color over top, and we're going to get a pretty good result. We'll talk about some pre-press that really helps dictate the quality of the results there too on black. But printing on white, again, I think you're going to find playing with some of these adjustments, playing with some of these features in Garment Creator, going to give you a little bit more versatility or potential for different results,
So
which is exciting.
Jennifer asks a pretty interesting question about
Sure.
if this were a full print on the t-shirt, what would the cost be? And she says just a ballpark because she knows
Yeah.
it's going to change.
Sure. That's a great question. There's two different ways to look at that. With direct-to-garment, we don't measure, unlike screen printing, we don't measure the color. We don't measure how many screens we're using. All we're doing with direct-to-garment is determining the size of the print, which will determine how much volume or how much ink is being consumed. So it's a matter of space, right? In this job, just this size, let's just look at the size of that one, which is really small. We're using white ink only. We have 600 milliliters for $217. We have some maintenance factored in here at about 75 cents a print. I can just hit estimate job, and for a single job, we're looking at 1 cent. It's using so little ink that it's not even actually registering the volume there. So it's less than a penny basically. So let's make this thing big. It's not to size or whatever. It's just, this is just for estimating the job. So in this case, it's reading none. That's interesting. That would be the first time that I've ever seen that. So maybe I can make an adjustment here to try to get you a better example. But while this is printing, I will tell you that this job is probably going to cost about 25 cents.
So while this is printing and while you're working on that, another question, and I think I know the answer, but I want to double check before I just...
Sure.
Travis is asking, well, he said he missed if the shirt was pre-treated or not.
Right, good question. You do not have to pre-treat on a white shirt, and this shirt is not pre-treated. You only need to pre-treat if you're using white ink. And that is because white ink just does not bond to cotton without a pre-treat solution. It will essentially fall through the garment. Color ink, however, will stick to cotton. You can pre-treat on white. There is potential for seeing a little bit better vibrancy, a little bit better results if you pre-treat. But there's a little bit of caution to that. You want to pre-treat, if you're going to pre-treat on white, make sure you're doing it so you're not oversaturating the garment, you're not putting down so much pre-treat as to affect the washability of the print. Epson ink is designed to print directly on a white shirt without the need for pre-treat solution and give you a maximum washability. So I prefer, frankly, to adjust the settings in Garment Creator to give me a better result than to pre-treat a white shirt just because it takes more time and it could potentially mess with washability. Though there are some tips and tricks that you can do before printing on a white shirt to help you get a little bit better results outside of Garment Creator with the pre-treat solution. I do have some videos and there's some articles on my website, prodtg.com, that'll give you a little bit better understanding about that. But again, it's not required. So looking at this, I frankly don't see any difference between unidirectional and bidirectional in this job. I do see a little bit more vibrancy and a little bit more clarity in some of the cables on the motorcycle and some of the chrome areas, but not something it's like kind of splitting hairs really. The customer probably wouldn't notice it. So in this case, unidirectional didn't really give us a better result, which is nice because it didn't take much long. It's not something that in this job isn't going to really be valuable. So let's do another one, and this is one I was kind of saving the best for last here. This is my favorite setting when printing on a white shirt. And the reason I like it is because this, especially in a job with a lot of oranges, a lot of warm colors, a lot of maybe facial, like skin tones, sunsets. There's a number of different ways that this function will really work well. So we're going to go under advanced, we're going to go back to bidirectional, and we're going to hit this button called ink blot reduction. Ink blot reduction will lay down yellow ink first, let that dry for just a quick second, and then put all of the darker colors over top. So you'll have less bleeding between, say, black and yellow. So if you have a job that's a lot of black and yellow, for example, doing this ink blot reduction technique will help a lot. Another function here under ink density, we'll just add it. It's not really that necessary, but you can always bump up your ink density a little bit. This will help fill in or make transparencies and gradients a little bit brighter. If you overdo it on ink density, you're just going to blow your design out. So typically we don't go too high on color ink density. I'm just going to add 15 just for the sake of showing you that it's capable. We probably won't see any results, big result changes here. So we'll go ahead and print that. We moved it into the other quadrant, so we're going to print in that little last corner there. So again, the whole purpose behind this is we're not wasting a lot of garments to test. You can flip this shirt over and use the other side. If a customer's providing the blanks, you don't necessarily want to waste their garments testing to see how you're going to print this thing the best, print their job the best. So I often ask for a couple extra garments just so you can do this type of testing. And we're not doing the full shirt and wasting a lot of ink just to get an example or get a test and make sure that we're going to print it right. You may print on the left chest, for example, in one of these quadrants for a design, and it looks perfect, and you're like, all right, I like it, let's just run with it. I'm sure the customer's happy with it, and that's fine. Again, it's better to be safe than sorry. We want to make sure that we're not wasting product.
So with embroidery, we talk about making sure that you have a garment that is as close to the final as possible,
Yeah.
and the same backing. And I know not all of those factors come in here, but when I was in school and we were dealing with kind of fine art prints on paper, when we were doing very similar test prints, we always made sure that we had the final paper to test on, because that made a big difference. Is that a big difference to make sure that you have the same shirt?
Yeah, especially, that's a really good question, because shirt really dictates the result in direct-to-garment. So we may have, for example, we might use a company, we're using a company called Spectra here, which is an outstanding blank, really high-quality cotton, really good yarn, really good dye. The result that we have on a Spectra is going to be noticeably different than you would, say, have on a Gildan. So it's certainly not apples to apples when it comes to t-shirts on direct-to-garment. So that's why it's important to sample on the product that the customer is providing. If they say, hey, I want to see it on a black shirt, great. But I can tell you right now, you buy 5 different black shirts, you might see 5 different results with the exact same settings in Garment Creator. So that's another reason why testing is important. Same with white, and a lot of it is dependent on the quality of the yarn, how well it's woven, how tight the stitch is. We call them 30 single, 40 single, 15 single. There's a number of different yarn weights and stitches. And a lot of people overlook how important the dye is. Some animal byproducts are used in certain manufacturers, and that dye will have a tendency to migrate through the ink. That's called dye migration. That's something that's pretty common. So what I like to do is really narrow down the products that we use and simplify it in the pre-production side. So when we move into the dark colored shirts here using white ink, you're going to see how important that is. But typically what I would say, Spectra apparel is outstanding. Cotton Heritage is really some of the best. Hanes Nano, Fruit of the Loom Soft Spun. These are some of the blanks that we really like that are going to give us consistent results every single time. And I would recommend, as a DTG operator, finding those blanks that you know work, pre-treating the garments like very consistently in a process that you know that works well, and sticking to that. A customer may come to you and say, hey, I really want this done on a Gildan. And you say, great, we can certainly do it, but just so you know, the results are going to be a little bit different than you might see on something like a Spectra or a Hanes Nano. And show them those. Have a Gildan printed, and then have a design printed on a Gildan and design printed on a Spectra blank, and say, here's the difference. These are the exact same settings, the exact same being cost, but this is what you're going to see as far as quality differences. So certain things to consider. All right, so you didn't get to see that, but it laid down yellow first. It took a little bit longer. I'm going to lift this up now and bring it closer to the camera so you can get a good look. But ink blot reduction definitely gives us the most reliable or the highest quality result. So I think we're not going to have. So if you look on your screen, that's the unidirectional, and that's with ink blot reduction. So prior to doing this was our best result, and with ink blot reduction, this is now our best result. It really does look outstanding.
And I can tell that from across the room, guys.
Yeah, and if you can't tell on the screen, there's no blurring. The colors are vibrant and rich. It takes longer, but if your customer's looking for the absolute best result, that ink blot reduction technique is going to be your best.
There are a few more questions.
Sure.
If you can answer while you're doing stuff.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask them in not the order they came up. But once you've figured out the perfect setting, do you have to make any changes when you go larger? So for embroidery,
no.
We do.
Right.
But for print, not so much.
No.
Essentially, what we deal with in density is ink dots or drops, and those are going to be set for no matter, or however big you set.
Yeah, so if anything, if it looks good small, it'll look bigger better. It'll look better bigger?
No, I'm sorry. I'm flashing back to my life drawing class. If you can't draw big. Cool.
Yeah.
And then what is the maximum size of the print?
Right, so on the Epson F2100, our max print area is 16 by 20. I'm using a 14 by 16 platen now, which is your standard.
Then Travis has two questions. One, do you want to come to Alaska?
Sure.
And then two,
can we fish? Can we do some fishing?
What does 30 single mean?
Right, 30 single is yarn count, weight. So you'll find that the higher quality blanks are labeled as 30 single as opposed to, say, a Gildan, for example, it might be a 15. So there's 15, 20, 30. I think they go higher, even 40. There's some Pima cotton that's maybe 40 or something like that. I'm certainly not an expert on that, though I did write an article with some advice from an expert on that, choosing blanks for your direct-to-garment printer on Pro DTG. So I would recommend reading that. But yeah, 30 single. Anything typically ring spun is also going to be 30 single. That's not always the case, but ring spun is really the key words that you're looking for. Yeah. All right, so we got a black shirt on. Sorry for the cough, got a little something going on there. But we're going to go ahead and choose a black color t-shirt now. We're on the computer, which is good. And same process. I'm going to move it into the left quarter here. Which actually, and I'm just going to do the default settings. So whatever I choose, if I choose dark color garment in Garment Creator, it's just going to have default settings. In this case, I'm choosing black color t-shirt. That means that any black ink will not print. So we're not going to print white ink under it. We're not going to print black ink over top of it. If I was printing on a navy blue t-shirt, for example, if I was printing this job on a dark brown t-shirt or a dark gray t-shirt, I would need to choose dark color t-shirt because that means it will print black as well. So dark color, black color t-shirt, use garment black is exactly what that is. It's not printing black ink. Default settings, no changes whatsoever. Gonna press print. The printer's going through a automatic cleaning cycle now. Every once in a while, it'll just spit a little. It'll circulate a little bit of ink through the system. These are all maintenance features that really have revolutionized how reliable direct-to-garment printing can be. For some of you that have been around for a while and know about the direct-to-garment industry, it was extremely unreliable for a long time, and Epson has essentially resolved those issues. This machine is outstanding when it comes to reliability and ease of use. It just works, and you need that when running production. So again, all of this is about making money. I like to call this machine, and actually a customer of ours told us this. He goes, "Man, John, the thing just prints money." And I love that analogy because it's sort of true, right? We're putting in a T-shirt, now it's coming a product that we can maximize margins on and sell for a considerable volume. Typical return on a black T-shirt is about 150 to 200+%. Typical return on a light color t-shirt is around 1,000% return, where it might cost us 15, excuse me, 25, 30, 45, 50 cents on a light color t-shirt with just coloring. On a black t-shirt, for example, this one costs around $2.30. So a little bit more cost, but really if we're selling these shirts for 15, 17 bucks, is, you know, even at a wholesale price, you're into the shirt for maybe between $2 and $3. You're into the print between $2 and $3. So let's just say 6, 7 at the most. Ideally between 5 and 6 is going to be your cost range. Still plenty of margin left in that. So this is our default setting. And one of my arguments with printing on a dark colored t-shirt is if you don't get a good result, from a print that with the default setting on a black color t-shirt, then something's wrong. And in this case, our whites are nice and bright white. Our colors look good. The transparencies look good. The colors are vibrant. This is a sellable shirt in my opinion. I always argue that the default setting is where you should start. If the customer wants more, you have room to go. If a customer wants less, you have room to go. But always assume that your default setting should give you a good result. And while I'm doing this other setting and while this other one is printing, I'll talk about some of those pre-press techniques that will help you guarantee a good quality result with a default setting. So I just moved the design over to the other quadrant here. Same thing, black color t-shirt. I'm just gonna go to level 6 quality, which seems in this case probably overkill. One thing I like to do is reduce the white area to 3 typically. That's just choking your underbase back just a little bit. So sometimes the shirt may shift on the platen, or maybe maybe there's some super fine lines and you don't want the white necessarily poking through in certain areas, like on guitar strings on an image, or in this case some of the lines on the motorcycle or the wings of the feather. Not usually a big issue, but typically I just change the default from 2 to 3. And we'll just max out white basically and choke back the underbase a little bit. This is overkill in my opinion, but while this is printing, we'll talk a little bit about that pre-press stuff. So with direct-to-garment, especially printing on a black color t-shirt or a dark color t-shirt with white ink, it's crucial that you follow 3 steps prior to printing. These are 3 pre-press non-negotiables, I call them. 1, make sure you have a good quality garment. So ring spun, 30 single, a shirt that you know is going to work well. Spectra, Cotton Heritage, Hanes Nano, Fruit of the Loom soft spun. Those are 4 guarantees. So work with those 4 guarantees and then you can start experimenting with the others. But set up accounts with those companies if you don't have them already. Those are going to give you the best possible results. 2, make sure you've pre-treated the shirt properly. If you cut corners, if you don't pre-treat the right consistency or use a good quality pre-treat, you're going to see a poor result. So don't use a spray bottle. Ideally, you would not be using a roller, though it certainly does work, and we are a big advocate for that for a long time. And I have videos on how that can be done, and I like it, but with the way Pretreat is being formulated now, it needs to atomize. So putting it through a sprayer is going to give you the best result. Buy a Pretreat machine that works well. We sell 2 different types of Pretreat machines here at Melco, the Zoom AE and the Mr. T1. The Zoom AE is a production machine. It can run all day long. It's extremely reliable. It's easy to clean and use. The Mr. T1 is more of a smaller type shop operation, one that you might use in your basement. It works great, but you need to keep it clean. Pretreat is kind of like watered down Elmer's glue, and so it'll get stuck in those lines. It'll clog the print head or clog the nozzle, so you just want to make sure you keep that thing clean. And I made a really valuable instruction manual on how to keep it clean. If you have one and you want that manual, email me and I'll send you that manual. But pre-treating is important. So 1, good quality shirt. 2, make sure you pre-treat properly. And 3, make sure your print head is printing a good nozzle pattern. And that's really easy to do. Typically, you turn the thing off, you turn it on, and it's going to print a good nozzle pattern. So If it's not, follow the maintenance techniques to make sure you can do that. On your printer, there's a QR code. Just turn on the camera on your phone, and it'll pull up. It'll read the QR code and take you right to the website to how to do maintenance. Again, Melco has all the maintenance manual videos that I've created to do the maintenance on the F2100, but it's also simple. It's not really worth talking about. But make sure that you have a good nozzle pattern, make sure you've pre-treated properly, make sure you use a good quality shirt. If you do that, you're going to get good quality results on the default setting through Garment Creator. So this is double strike white. We've laid down 2 layers of white. Our white is about as bright as it's going to get. White is white. If you no sense in overkill on white because you're just putting white on top of white. It's not going to get any whiter, right? Once it's white, it's white. So I really encourage you to not overdo the white. That's just going to take more time and money. If you follow those 3 steps, you can get away with less ink consumption, less white ink. In this case, it looks outstanding. Level 6 just looks beautiful. We have really perfect gradients. I mean, it's hard to say that it would get any better than this, really. But we'll try.
A few more questions.
Yeah.
How much is the printer? And I don't know.
Yeah. So it retails at $17,995. Epson has some incentives this month. Melco has some incentives this month. In the month of September, the printer is $15,495. Plus, you get free 20 liters of Pretreat solution from Epson. That's going to last you a long, long time. We will ship it for free to your location. Then you have the opportunity to do training a number of different ways. We can do video training for you and give you a little bit of extra store credit through shopmelco.com, or we can send someone out there, like Alaska, for example, do a little salmon fishing and teach you how to use your printer at the same time. So,
other questions, and I kind of get where Judy's headed with this.
Yes.
But what kind of fabrics can you print on?
Great question. So, I'm just going to do a little history lesson. In the old days, it used to be cotton or cotton blends. Now, with the advent of new Pretreat solutions, we can now print on 100% polyester, which is great. So we're not as limited as we were before. So cotton blends, polyester. We've printed on leather. We've printed on canvas. You can do bamboo.
What about satin?
Satin, I don't know.
I'm a little nervous with the satin due to the bleeding
and like falling through
the shadow effect that may happen, but it's definitely
if it
worth
was
a
white
shot.
satin, yeah, it's certainly worth a shot, and I think you might even pre-treat it or use any one of those techniques. But I'd love to try it. If somebody wants to send us a sample, or Nate, maybe that's something we can pick up later and try a sample of.
Yeah,
but
I can place an order.
People are getting creative. So we have customers. We're printing on neoprene koozies, right? There's blue jeans, jean jackets, like I said, leather, strips of leather.
I'm thinking of all the flour sack tea towels that have beautiful botanic prints that are in all the home stores that
Terry
you see.
cloth towels, yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. Tote bags.
And how much will an image fade from DTG after washing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something Epson really takes a lot of pride in. They put a lot of effort into making sure that their ink, once it's on the garment, it stays, and they get the best possible test wash rating in the industry. So through an independent test called the AATCC, they test washability on substrates like on decorated apparel, and Epson gets a 5 out of 5. So it's as good as it gets. It's as good, if not better, than properly cured screen printing. So if you cure it properly, it's there. But that's the element. If you don't cure it properly, it could wash out. And so I'll get a call every once in a while that says, hey, John, print looked great. I ran it through the washer and it washed out. The simple solution is it's not cured. So add a little bit more heat and time. 320 degrees on your heat press for 75 seconds with very little pressure. That's going to give you a perfect cure with white ink. Okay, let's try another setting. So when you're printing on dark color garments, the settings, the difference that we're making here, really the results are pretty negligible if you do the first 3 things right. Our default settings are good. So here's my go-to setting. I'm typically level 4. My color, I'll bump up the density of the color to 25%. I'll pump up the density of the white to about 25%. Oh, it's more like 20 and 25. The white print quality here, we can manage the settings independently, or color print quality, we can manage the settings independently. We can add a double strike, and that'll change it to custom level 5. We'll do that one next. But here's typically my default setting. Level 4, 2020, reduce white area to 3. This gives me a little bit better result than the default setting. It doesn't cost me any more. It's maybe 20 cents more in ink, but it gives me a little bit better result. And this would be the happy medium that I would kind of approach a customer with. I'd say, hey, this would be the setting I would choose. As long as I did my other pre-press stuff correctly, I would present this to them and say, hey, this is what it's going to cost. This is what it's going to look like. What do you think? And they may like it, and you're off and running, which they probably will. And if they don't, you have room to go up, like I said. And if they need less, you have room to go down. And sometimes they do. Maybe a customer wants it to look a little more vintage. They want it to look a little more faded. A lot of times we think we need to lay down more white ink for this to look the way it should look. That's not necessarily the case. Maybe we need to pull back on the white. Maybe we need to have just a little bit of white laid down and a lot more color or less color, so it gives it more of a vintage look. But I would say adjust those things in the print setting as opposed to in the pre-production setting. Always get yourself situated so you can get your best possible results. Just like in screen printing. If you wanted a distressed look, it's better to build that distress into the artwork than it is to try to create the distress on the platen or with a damaged squeegee or something like that. Build it into the artwork so you have more control for consistency. What do we have?
So Travis has questions on Pretreat.
Sure.
Armor versus Epson?
Yep, Under Armour, or Image Armor, excuse me, versus Epson. There's a number of brands out there. I prefer Epson Pretreat primarily because it's certified non-toxic. The new Epson Pretreat works really well on blends and 100% cotton, and you don't see any staining like you did before. Not that Image Armor isn't good. I think you get really crisp, high-quality results, but Image Armor and Epson ink were not designed in conjunction to work together. They certainly do, but I wouldn't guarantee the washability of it. You can't guarantee the non-toxicity of it, whereas Epson Pretreat solution is considered, it's non-toxic. It works perfectly with Epson ink, and it's going to give you that outstanding washability and vibrancy. And minimize staining. So I don't see why necessarily to use anything else, but some customers find that in everyone's environment is different. So I'm not saying don't experiment, but I think you'll find that Epson Pretreat will certainly do the job. So here's my default setting. I mean, looking at it on screen, this from where I am, it's hard to tell the difference in any of these, and that really solidifies my point of the pre-press, how important that is. So here's our original default setting. Here's level 5, so almost max white, not quite, but very close. White's white. And then here's my default setting. Our whites do look bright. It looks better than the original default setting. It's a little bit more vibrant. And again, it's a good medium, good starting point.
I think you're, at least from here,
Yep.
your fades and gradients to transparent are really nice on that last one you did.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. And those are things to consider too. I mean, our gradients can certainly adjust with the amount of density and how much how much white ink or the density of the ink that you're laying down. So the more you mess with density, the more you're going to see there's some changes there. All right, so back to the computer here. We'll move over to the other quadrant. And let's just blow this thing out. Let's just go crazy. We'll go level 6 quality. We'll double strike it. We'll blow up max white. So this is max white. So if I go quality and then hit double strike, it's going to go back to 5. So double 5 print quality. Double strike means it's going to print white, go back in, print white again. And then if we max up our density to 20%, I was told very early on from Epson specifically that this is the max amount of white you'll be able to achieve on a properly pre-treated shirt with a good good quality cotton. So we're just going to go crazy. Again, this is overkill in my opinion. The times I would use that would be if I'm printing, say, white on black or white on a color shirt and I just want white ink. if you lay down too much white, it'll have a tendency to pool. It'll pool up. And then once you put color over top of it, you're putting color ink on wet pooled white ink, and it'll have a tendency to blur and smear and smudge. So that's a little bit of overkill. But some people, and here's what happens, and here's the kind of calls that I receive from customers who say, hey John, I'm just not getting a good quality result. I can tell you it's not the printer, it's not Garment Creator. If it's not those two things, what must it be? You're using a poor quality shirt, or you're not pre-treating properly. So always think about those two factors. If you put a shirt in there and you use the default setting and it doesn't look good, it looks muted and faded and just muddy, it's likely that you're using a poor quality shirt or poor quality pre-treat. So the solution, again, and I can't stress the importance, is to always make sure you do the pre-press correctly. You can do that, you're going to get good results every time.
I'm going to throw one more thing in, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
you were talking about muddy and things like that.
Yeah.
In my head, bright green just, you have to still use colors that can be reproduced using CMYK, and there are colors that you can create on a computer that exist outside of that spectrum.
Right.
So
yeah. So
beware of that.
Yeah, and let me just add to that that we design in RGB. So even though it's a CMYK printer, there's color profiles that are closer to the RGB spectrum than the CMYK spectrum. So there's certain colors we're going to be able to hit if you design in RGB, which is the highest spectrum, as opposed to designing in CMYK. So make sure all your artwork is not only high resolution and 2 size, but is also designed in RGB. So you might as well maximize that spectrum. And Epson will be able to read those color profiles and get you a considerably better result in the RGB spectrum as opposed to CMYK. So there you go, a double strike white. I mean, that almost looks too much in my opinion, as opposed to just standard level 6 there. Yeah. It's fun, and I mean, looking at this in person, you can't really see too much of a difference in a lot of these, and that is really the whole part of the point of this. All right, so I got to do everything backwards here, and oh, this way. Oh, okay, and there. So that's the point of this presentation. One, don't use all of your resources to get a sample. Two, adjust your settings accordingly to what the customer's needs are, not what your needs are. And 3, make sure that you're doing all your pre-press stuff correctly. So I'm just going to set this down here. And if there's not any more questions.
There's one more question.
Great.
Dealing with 100% poly?
Yes.
Using even the poly pre-treat, the ink falls off with a slight spray of water.
Okay, so that's been your experience?
That is Travis's experience.
Okay, that's a curing issue. So the solution would be with poly pre-treat, you need to make sure you apply, cover the whole garment, right? Make sure that you're applying enough pre-treat, and then make sure it's 100% dry. As with all pre-treat with direct-to-garment, if it's not 100% dry, you're going to have some washability issues and ink binding issues, bonding issues. So it must be 100% dry. If you're at all questioning that, make sure that you put it back under the heat press or run it through the conveyor dryer or let it air dry until it's there. Once you've pre-treated the shirt, you can print it. Don't use too much white ink is the other thing with polyester pre-treat. Those settings that I was using where I was laying down a ton of white, that's going to affect your washability and your durability of the ink on the garment. And we have a tendency to think, well, I'm printing on polyester, I need it to be bright. But the reality is polyester is not going to accept white ink very well regardless, so you're never going to see as bright of a result on a polyester as you would on 100% cotton. So don't fight it by trying to put down more white ink, because that just inhibits the washability and durability of it. So it's almost...
It's on safety vests.
It's on safety vests.
So there may be some of that neon craziness going on too.
Yeah, and there's big holes, and so I haven't tested on that yet, but I'd love to try. But my recommendation is use less white ink, make sure it's 100% dry, and then after it's been printed, ensure that you've dried it properly. So There are some recommendations on my website for curing times, prodtg.com, where I use how to use polyester Pretreat. There's an article I wrote. The trick is to not overheat it. So don't use a super high pressure like you would or temperature like you would on cotton. I think it's 285 is the temperature. We're going to put it under the heat press for a little bit longer, and we're going to use very little pressure. The idea is just to evaporate the moisture and let it bond the best you can. So if you're having washability issues, try to make sure that you adjust your curing technique to make sure that it's cured properly.
And then Jennifer asked a question because
Yep.
she wanted to break my brain.
Oh, great.
And it was a question on setup time for designs of DTG versus embroidery.
Right.
And I don't really know how to answer that question. I worked in an art department for a screen print place, and for me, setup time, creating the artwork, if you start from scratch and create the artwork,
Yeah.
once you're done creating the artwork, you're kind of done for DTG. And then if you're doing embroidery, you have to translate all that back into stitches.
Yeah.
If you're getting the artwork already done, the embroidery, you have to convert all that into stitches. For DTG, kind of depends on what the artwork looks like when you get it and how many requests you have to get high resolution and
Right.
nice looking artwork.
Right.
Or are you rebuilding it? Ugh, don't rebuild it.
People do.
Used to be my job. No, thank you.
Yeah, it's not great.
So I don't really know how to answer that question. I think embroidery does take a little bit more time to set up because you're kind of doing things twice if you create the artwork and then convert it to stitches. DTG, you're either just creating the artwork or you're just getting the artwork and kind of printing it out with a few different settings.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you have to pre-treat your garment if
that
you're using
answers
white
that.
ink.
Aye, but that's not the design itself.
Yeah, that's not the design itself.
Yeah.
And as opposed to screen printing, for example, it's considerably easier, right? Because I can take an image just right off my cell phone, put it in Garment Creator and press print. If I wanted to do anything to it, I use graphic design software, but for the most part, I can just print right from it's just like a home-based printer. Whereas screen printing, for example, you have to separate the art, you have to create films.
You got to create your own underbase if you're going on
create
black.
your own underbase, right?
Trapping. Super fun.
Yeah, super fun. There's a lot to it. Cleaning screens, drying screens, coating screens with emulsion, drying the emulsion, exposing the screen, washing out the screen, setting up the screen, or drying the screen, taping off the screen, aligning the screen on the press. I mean, there's a million things to do to get multiple colors light up, whereas on a digital printer, you essentially drag the artwork in and press print. Yeah. Any more questions?
With ink being water soluble, if you wash the garment before the ink dries, will the ink wash out?
Yes. So there's a difference in dry and cure. And I love this question because I like my answer. You can air dry a shirt to the touch and it'll be dry. You won't be able to rub it off with your hand. You might be able to if you put a lot of pressure into it. That'll be dry. That's basically the water drying and the ink sitting on the garment. But there's a difference in dried and cured. And a cured shirt is actually heat set into the garment. It requires heat. It requires 300 and some plus degrees for a consistent amount of time to make sure that all the water is evaporated and it's cured and it's locked into the garment. And again, once it's locked in, Epson says it's there for the life of the garment.
So here's why it's being asked.
Okay.
Can you reuse the garment if you don't cure it?
That has happened, yeah. And you will have some residue, however. So if, for example, you're printing something small here and you made a mistake and you're like, I don't really want to waste this shirt, I'd love to reuse it. Theoretically, you could try to wash it out, clean it the best you can, pre-treat it and reuse it. I haven't done that, but again, that's theoretical. But I imagine that's possible.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. That was a good one.
I think, other than some specifics from Travis that I may have you look at after we're
Yeah,
done.
happy to. Travis, just email me so you guys know, LeDrew@melco.com. You can get a hold of me on prodtg.com as well. Happy to talk about this stuff as whatever you guys have.
Will this replace sublimation? I think those are two very different applications.
And that's a great question, and they certainly are. The difference is primarily sublimation has to be done on a white or extremely light colored garment. So sublimation is not likely going to use white ink. that could very well happen, but I don't see that. Talking with the industry professionals and the makers of this equipment, we don't see that technology necessarily coming. The benefit to direct-to-garment is you're printing directly on the substrate. It's soft. You can use white ink. It's a lot. It's a breathable application as opposed to screen printing. And again, we can print on dark garments. Sublimation has its place. It's breathable. It's outstanding, but you have to use polyester. You can't use a cotton, and people often want cotton shirts. So sublimation has its limitations, as does direct-to-garment. So they're each their own application. They're each durable, or not durable, but versatile in their own way. So good question.
Excellent. I think
Yeah.
that's about everything.
Good. Well, it was a good first debut, I'd say.
I think you did well. I
Yeah,
think you did
not
very
bad.
well. Thank you
There
so
will be
much,
more.
everybody.
There will be more digital stuff. Look for a lot of digital stuff coming from Melco, and a lot of combination of applications between embroidery and dye sublimation and direct-to-garment and solvent print cut. I mean, we're doing all sorts of fun stuff, and we're going to teach you how to do that, so you can turn that information over to your customers and those product capabilities, and really maximize the capabilities of your shop and make as much money as possible. So thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.